Hello, everybody. My name is Hannah Jo, and I am the host of the District House. Welcome. Tonight, I am seated here with our guest, Debra Meehl. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I'm really looking forward to getting to know more about you. And it's my understanding so far that you're a shaman and you have a particular interest in soul retrieval among, I'm sure, many interests. But tonight, that will be our focus of your presentation, which we'll get to in about 20 or 30 minutes. But I just want to give space if there's more you want to add of who you are in this stage, in this moment.
Okay. I think if I back up just a little bit, because several people have asked me how I got here. And so I tell people that I started out as a paramedic in my 20s, and I was a paramedic for 10 years. I had studied indigenous medicine and Eastern modalities my entire life. And there was a big shift that happened as I stepped out of that. There was a series of events, and as I stepped out of that, I became more involved, probably spiritually, as I stepped away from, again, a lot of traditional religion. And what happened is that I became a dialectical behavioral therapist. And I specialized in bipolar and borderline personality disorder. So women came to me and spent 90 days in my home. We took 6 women at a time. And through that process, I became extraordinarily tired and burned out. And it took 10 years for me to get burned out, because I'm kind of a bulldog with a bone. But it took 10 years, and I realized that I was struggling with a dark night of the soul. I wasn't clinically depressed, but I felt like, there was a piece missing. And so I went to Costa Rica and did ayahuasca for 14 days, had a profound experience with that. Came back and knew immediately. We sold our home. I was told almost exactly where we would be. We moved to Washington. I gutted my program, and I began doing weekend retreats because it was psilocybin that called me, not ayahuasca, interestingly enough. And so my belief is that those of us that do this work, the plant itself calls to you. And that's how I ended up doing what I do today. So, and we've been in Washington for 3 years. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it's my sense that the audience would desire a little bit of clarification around a couple familiar to me words that you just dropped, but maybe new to their ears. And so briefly, I'd love for you to talk about what ayahuasca is. And then also if you can provide an expansion on what a dark night of the soul involves.
Sure. So ayahuasca is an entheogen. For those of you that don't know what that name is, it's related to, again, entheo is about God. All entheogens, whether it's ayahuasca or psilocybin or bufo, peyote, all of those have and allow you to have a direct connectedness to nature and to the God or creator of your understanding. So ayahuasca specifically is an MAOI inhibitor. It's a real clinical term for the part of your brain that it works on. So it again allows you to be in a sacred space within your mind, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on, about what that looks like in regards to soul retrieval. It allows you to have that connection and that, I'm going to say, in heightened spiritual experience. So when you experience, and I was introduced to ayahuasca, I say by accident, but of course, I now believe that there's everything within divine timing. And so I had gone to Costa Rica to see Michael Beckwith, who wrote a book about the dark night of the soul. There's been several written, but Michael Beckwith wrote it, very interesting, and he was putting on a workshop in Costa Rica. And so I was going to that workshop. I knew absolutely nothing about ayahuasca, and when I got off the community bus with a couple of other people, one couple where she was a therapist, and we discussed it, I knew right away that I wasn't there just to hear Michael Beckwith speak. I was also there to do a lot of my own healing work. And so that dark night of the soul is more like a feeling of, it's not just being clinically depressed, it's more like a feeling, again, that you feel disconnected from, again, your creator or the God of your understanding, and it feels like there's a piece missing. So that's probably my best way of describing it, at least personally.
I appreciate that, and I feel really grateful for your artistic explanation of what ayahuasca provides. And something that I was just with as you were speaking is in this role of housing women with bipolar disorder or maybe other things happening within themselves. You were in this role of like multidimensional caretaking and pouring a lot of yourself into others' healing. Yeah.
Yeah, until I'd used up all of my own energy and I needed to step into a different place because I think once you're in that type of energy all the time and you're attempting to be grounded and do self-care and all of that, there's a place where it's not enough anymore. It's not enough to just get a massage. It's not enough to just drink a cup of tea and take a hot shower and do whatever and then go back. There's a place where you've extended yourself enough that it feels like there's no reserve left. And that's the easiest way to explain, and yet it's the hardest way to explain because other people don't understand unless they've experienced that.
Yeah, I really, at an intellectual level, understand what you're describing. And
go ahead. Think about it this way. Think about going to school full time and working full time and then go home and care for 2 or 3 children and do the laundry and the dishes and the whatever else and fall into bed year after year at midnight and get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and then wonder why your life doesn't feel complete.
Can I get a show of hands if anyone here can relate to that? Maybe just a little bit.
So that is different, and I what I think happens a lot of times is that, and this is, again, I worked in Western medicine for a very long time. You go to your doctor and you explain how tired they are, and they run all the tests, and they give you, a pill that's supposed to help, and none of that helps because nothing else has changed. So I think as we become more aware, what's happening is that we are then given an opportunity, sometimes several opportunities, to make new changes. And we may not pick it up the first time or the second time, but somewhere along the way we pick up that change, and then we start making profound. And for me, that's what it took.
Yeah, totally. And something else I received from that bit is like you were going through the motions of what culture might call self-care.
Oh, yeah.
And so you're doing the things that they tell you to do to feel better again, but it wasn't actually regenerative to your energy.
Correct.
In a way that was enlivening or gave you the pour over and bandwidth you needed to be in service the way your heart and your soul ultimately wants to be.
Right. So I came home after that, 14 days, and gutted my program, my very lucrative program. And I had to, again, make changes in regards to therapists and a team. And then I got to tell my partner at the time, we're not going to make the kind of money we made before. You can imagine how that went. So, but there becomes this steel-like, because what you decide is it's not about happiness and joy, it's about peace. And so for me, having that peace that passes understanding was far more important than anything else. And so you could have a tantrum and jump up and down and have all kinds of whatever, and I would just go, well, this is unfortunate for you because we're just going to do weekend retreats now, and we're not going to do the same thing we did before.
And what's interesting to me is like the previous before Costa Rica version of yourself still was in this desire to want to help people and want to serve. And yet when you came back from that experience and actually withdrew these aspects of yourself that were presenting in service, being helpful in the ways that you were, in my perspective, that actually was of a higher benefit for you to withdraw and pivot and reform your business and your offerings, even if that activated emotional outbursts for those that you were in partnership with.
Exactly. And it was very interesting because there was a place where I knew what I was going to do, but I didn't have an exact plan. So people would say to me, "What is your plan?" Don't you love that? And you go, well, I think it's going to look kind of like this. And nobody wants to hear that. And so what happened is that, again, I believe that when you at least get old enough that you can look back in your life and you can see how things happened along the way that got you where you're at, whether they're good or bad, it doesn't matter. But what happened is that I had a woman that came to a retreat that I did that didn't have any psychedelics in it at all. And she had said to me, "Oh, you need to meet so-and-so because so-and-so has this amazing product and you need to be doing this." And it was like, bing, I went, well, this is what I've been waiting for. Oh my goodness, this is how I'm supposed to do this. And it's very interesting because that individual is still in my life today. I've learned a lot in regards to, what he does and the products and that kind of thing. So it's all been a part of being in that flow. That, again, is difficult to explain to people.
Yeah, I really understand the difficulty of the explanation, and a theme that I have noticed throughout the folks that I interview in this role is there is a mention or sometimes an emphasis on it's not good things that happen or bad things that happen, it is things that happen for our evolution always. Yes. And that in itself, if we're not familiar with that framework, in my perspective, is something to become curious about and to play with, okay, how would this feel different if I didn't name it as bad or judge it through a lens of negativity, and maybe did become curious about embracing it as an opportunity for my growth. And I feel like when it comes to building business in the space of being a pioneer in the psychedelic realm, like there's surely no plan. We are here to create that new template and to actualize that new blueprint and to activate that shift in consciousness.
I agree.
And so I just want to celebrate you for taking what we might call those brave or courageous strides forward, but I'm also with you in acknowledging the divinity of this pathway that, in my perspective, your soul has very precisely chosen.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to share more about what your work looks like these days, since you gutted that old template?
So I think that, I try to convey to people that there is, in the psychedelic community, we're just on the tip of truly understanding how psychedelics work. I have people that are usually somewhere between 35, believe it or not, and 80. Those people that are 35 are trying to find a path. Those people that are 75 to 80 are trying to leave the path. And they're trying to figure out how to do that and not be afraid to transition, which I think is beautiful. So we provide a space for people to do either. I take very small groups of people. I personally only serve 5 people at a time. I realize that there are other places that have large groups, and I feel a certain way about that. And I think that if you do that, people have to be extraordinarily well trained, and everybody has to be on their game. It's very difficult to make that happen, I think, in this day and age, but it is possible. I do a lot of preparatory work so people know exactly what they're going to experience in psychedelics. Everything I've ever read, anything that anybody's ever told me, because you don't want to go into any psychedelic experience being fearful. And I think that's the biggest thing of trying something new that's way outside of the box. So I'll just tell everybody, I was born in 1961, so I grew up in the 80s, and all drugs were bad. That's what we learned, right? Everything is bad. Unless your doctor gives it to you, everything is bad. Now, it doesn't matter that there's 200,000 medication errors a year. That doesn't matter. The only thing that we believed at the time that mattered was that your doctor gave you the pill, so it was really okay. So I get that that's the culture that a lot of us grew up in, and so it was way outside of the box for me to even think about doing ayahuasca. I watched a 15-minute video, and I research everything. I only watched a 15-minute video before I did ayahuasca the first time, which is really unusual behavior for me. And basically, I was at a point where I just said, if it doesn't kill me, I'm in. I mean, that's where I was at, because I couldn't tolerate that missing piece any longer. I knew that I was disconnected in some way, and I just wasn't going to do it anymore. So, and I absolutely knew that there wasn't another pill. So what I help people navigate that system so that, again, they can open themselves to the possibility and to be curious, because it is curiosity that, again, helps us in our own evolution. And so we spend a lot of time talking about that. And the other thing that the 80s produced was a whole bunch of us that believed no pain, no gain. And I believe that is the biggest bullshit that we were ever sold. Because that no pain, no gain thing, really, if you have been traumatized as a child or an adult, the last thing that you're going to do is ask for more pain. You're just not. And so as human beings, we need to know that the pain of the solution has to be less than the pain of the problem for you to choose it, usually. Now, granted, there's about 1% of us that can do more, but it's really, really rare. So I tell people doing ayahuasca, which I absolutely promote, I believe that ayahuasca is an amazing experience, but you also have to be willing to puke in a bucket for 5 hours. It is really, really arduous. It's worth it at the end, but psilocybin, quite frankly, is so much easier, and it produces the same results. And that, again, is another piece of the psychedelic information that a lot of us are trying to promote and understand. And not all psychedelics are the same. Liberty caps that you pick out of cow poop are not the same as golden teachers. It's not. It's not the same psilocybin. It's not the same effect. So we need to, again, more information, more education about what people can experience and how it can absolutely change their lives.
And more opportunities to come together in curious community like this to learn more.
And to share. I mean, again, I got the opportunity to talk to a couple of gentlemen. One had gone to Woodstock and had spent 7 days in a tree or whatever talking to, the birds and the bees and whatever, who said it was the most profound experience of his life. Those are the kinds of things that need to be reintroduced to a whole nother generation.
Yeah. I want to revisit something you said a moment ago around your seemingly certainty of not holding fear when entering the psychedelic space. And perhaps that's true among entering any space. I want you to float with that for a second, but I want to like balance it by saying like, oh, like, how do you have no fear? How do you create the experience of fearlessness? And if not feeling fearful, then what?
I began to explain to people what they can experience in regards to what the Western world would call hallucinations. And that's what most people are afraid of. And we'll talk a little bit about this during the presentation, but the big thing is I don't want to see dead people, and I don't want to see demons. That's because all of us, whether we know it or not, come from a background of Judeo-Christian thinking, which isn't a bad thing. It just is what it is. And that's what people are afraid of. They're afraid of the unknown. So if I can tell people that even when you do psilocybin, you have a measure of control of your own mind, that if something appears to you and it feels scary, first of all, I'm there, and I've seen just about all the scary things there are to see, so I'm not fazed. Second of all, there's certain skills that you learn when you do this kind of work. There's certain skills that I've learned being a shaman. And I also tell people over and over again, they get to hear the same message again and again. You get to turn the page. If something appears to you and it feels uncomfortable, you can just say to the universe, I don't like this anymore. I'd like something new. It happens that fast. I've never had somebody say, oh, the same demon appears and I can't get rid of it. Never. In all the time I've done this, never has that happened. I've had a lot of people say to me, I had no idea I had this level of control over my own mind. So, and then we talk about if things show up that make you afraid, ask it a question. So you see something scary, you see your dead grandmother. Why are you here? What do I have to learn from this? Is there something that you need to communicate to me? Is there something that I need to know? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then move on. You have the ability to move on.
I think that's really powerful and just real, that like in every moment we have the opportunity for a new relationship to that thing that we don't prefer. That might feel fearful or scary, but there is yourself in the container you hold providing just enough space to offer a curiosity and a willingness, right? I feel like that's a quality that you're showcasing and sharing that the people you explore this space with embody, is like there's a willingness to invite that scary part into dialogue to learn from it. And I also relate with you sharing that you've seen a lot and like your system is very regulated and balanced regardless of all that you've seen. And I feel there is an energetic sensitivity that people have to you when sharing that space where you extend safety to them in ways that maybe they don't understand.
Probably true.
Yeah. Totally. Well, I feel like soul retrieval is not something that I am familiar with. I've maybe heard it mentioned a little bit through other speakers' voices and perspectives. Is there any way that you would like to set the scene for the topic that you're going to introduce in your presentation?
For thousands of years, the reason I believe that shamans have used entheogens is because of soul retrieval. It is the way of, again, finding that missing piece. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the psychology of some of that, along with some of the indigenous belief about that, because I personally believe, and hopefully you will too at the end of this, that the two can absolutely be married together.
Sweet. Well, I look forward to learning more. I'm going to join the audience for the next bit of your presentation.
Okay.
And when I come back, we'll open it into audience Q&A. I'll have a couple rapid fire questions to ask you to close out.
Okay.
And is there anything else you'd like to share before you
No.
present?
I'm good.
Sweet.
Thanks. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the shamanic view of mental illness. And I know that there's a lot of words on some of these slides. I don't read them off there, but I really want you to get a feel for them so that you can, again, ask questions if you want to. It's a little different once you begin, again, looking at the shamanic view of mental illness, because we believe that everything happens on a higher plane. All illness, whether it's mental, physical, or spiritual, happens on that plane, and we draw it down to us. And we do that for a variety of different reasons, and I'm going to get into some of those reasons about why that happens. But what happens is, on a shamanic level, is that once you retrieve a missing soul piece, you're actually permanently healed. That's the difference, okay? So soul loss happens when a fragment of ourselves, a fragment of our true essence, is again removed from us. And we can do that ourselves, unconsciously or consciously. But what happens is that that spiritual essence, the truest essence of us, if I was to use a different concept, I would say the divineness of it, the divine childlike innocence that we have, has somehow been disrupted. And what happens then is that we then have to make a choice about where that piece goes. For most of us, what we believe is that missing soul piece goes into Gaia or Mother Earth. It doesn't go to our own mother, because our own mother was unable to protect us. So it goes to a divine essence of Mother Earth to be held for us to, again, get it back. So what then happens is that unconsciously, we can give it away. Lots of times that happens before the age of 8, and it usually happens in some type of a traumatic event. Okay? It happens, it can happen because we've been abandoned. It can happen because we've been abused. It can happen because, again, we didn't live up to our parents' expectations of us. So as a child, my mother died when I was 2. My grandmother raised me. It was very traumatic. And it was very interesting because I heard all the time, I wish you could be more like your mother. So I want you to know that I spent the first part of my life trying to be fit in a box that I was never going to fit in. And it took me a while to understand that, and somewhere about 15 or 16, I didn't get it anymore. I wasn't going to be in anybody's box anymore. So the interesting thing about that, though, is that all of that, even though I had done lots and lots of therapy in my 20s and 30s, didn't actually come into my complete understanding of why that experience had happened until I had done 14 days of ayahuasca. And then the light bulb came on and I got it. So what happens to us lots of times, because we don't lots of times grow up in a community that feels tribal, that has grandmothers and aunties and all of that have a particular way of teaching, is that we don't get that information about, again, being in a particular situation or an event that, again, can harm us, and how we're going to, again, heal from that. So what happens then, though, consciously, is lots of times we're willing to give up a piece of ourselves. This happens lots of times within the gay community because, again, we don't fit in a particular box. So we're willing to give up who we are to fit in whatever in that community, because what we really want more than anything else is love, right? We want to feel loved. We want to feel accepted. And we want to feel like that, again, we can contribute. We can't feel any of those things, though, if in fact we're giving up pieces of ourselves. So then what happens then is that, again, we're trying to make other people happy. And I certainly did that as a small child, trying to make, again, a grandmother happy who had lost a child, my mother, whom she grieved until, again, the very day that she died. And I got that through, again, the entheogen work that I did. I came to understand and to feel and to know, because there's a collective consciousness, I believe, again, what it was that she was going through. So I was then able then to, again, let go of that and to step away from that. So what happens, we believe, is that through soul contracts and agreements, they arise out of the shock of our pain or the shock of our illness. So again, lots of illnesses can, again, prevent us from stepping into who we are as individuals. That pain and that soul contract or agreement, we believe as shamans, you're able to rewrite. So if you're able to rewrite that contract, if you came here to this, into this existence with a particular contract of poverty or illness or family despair or a variety of other things, you can rewrite that particular contract. And once you rewrite that contract, and usually that happens in lower world, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments, once you rewrite that contract, what happens then is you're released from the things that are happening to you that you would consider to be negative or that you don't want to experience any longer in your life. What happens when you do entheogen work, when you do psilocybin, when you do ayahuasca, when you do peyote, when you do any of those, is that many, many times, if you're led into it correctly, you're going to know exactly what you need to rewrite, and you're going to know how to do that, and who it is that comes to you within that state of being under those entheogens is going to help you do that work. Pretty amazing. And I will just tell you that story after story after story, I talk to many, many people, again, that are able to do those entheogens, whichever one that is. And like I had said before, I believe that there is a correct entheogen for everyone, a correct psychedelic, if you would like to say, for everyone that can allow you to step into that. People that are chronically depressed, I did work one time with a man that his whole family had been depressed. He'd been depressed for years. So one of the first clients that I had that actually came to me from another state, his psychiatrist sent him to me and said, whatever it takes, we'll get you off of whatever medication that you're on so that you can do this. Because he said, what I want to experience before I die, he was 72 years old, is I want to be able to experience not being depressed. And I said, okay, so let's take a look at that. And I got him ready to do it, and all of a sudden, you know, he has this amazing breakthrough. He tells me initially over and over again that he doesn't feel anything, so I give him more, and I give him a little more. And then there's a big explosion. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you know, I hear hollering, and, you know, I'm right there. And I said, what is it? What is it? And he goes, I'm in Russia. And my contract is that everyone dies before I die. And I choose that because I want to hold them so they don't feel alone. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd be depressed if all of my people were dying and I was the last one. Interestingly, I said, okay. I said, what do you want to do about that? And he goes, I want to just make sure that going forward that my sons and my daughters and my grandchildren don't carry this generationally forward any longer. It ends with me. And I said, so be it. And again, the next day he said, I'm a changed human being. No longer the same. No longer the same. That's the kind of work that, again, I believe, again, that we can achieve. We also have a lot of irrational beliefs. A great psychologist in the 50s by the last name of Skinner talks about there was a great test, you can probably get it on the internet, and it's the 10 most common irrational beliefs that people have. For example, one of my favorite is that I must be unfailingly competent in all that I do. That's those type A personalities. I don't know anything about that. But that's that type A personality that believes if we can just do it all ourselves and we don't rely upon anybody else to do it for us, it'll get done a lot better. Okay? Not a good place to be. The other one is that my friends and my family must love and accept me all of the time. Trust me, they don't. Okay? And so I'm just saying that if you have that belief, you're going to give out, you're going to be a people pleaser, you're going to turn yourself wrong side out to make everybody else happy, and you're going to wonder why your cup is half empty all of the time. So when we look at those things, we look at contracts, and then we look at how we're conditioned to believe certain things and behave a certain way, that, again, is part of us evolving and moving forward. Somebody had asked me earlier about my tattoo, and we had a little discussion. I was 60 when I got this because, of course, good girls and really nice women don't have anything that runs up their neck because that's really bad. So we have all kinds of social stigmas that we live by and that we give ourselves, again, pieces of ourselves away. And then we wonder why we don't feel fulfilled, why we don't feel happy, why we don't give back to our communities. So soul retrieval is a process by shamans. We can do this without entheogens, but I want you to know it's much easier to do it with entheogens. Much, much easier. We can, again, journey to the spirit world. And the difference between, again, being a shaman and not being a shaman is that you, as a shaman, are directly connected to not only your ancestors and to the land, but again, you have a spiritual totem tribe that speaks directly to you. Shamanism is a belief system that allows you a knowingness. And so when I go into medicine space with people, and I'll talk a little bit about this, I don't have to have all the right answers. Okay? I don't have to know when I'm going to do something within that medicine space that I hold for people because I'm directly told what I'm going to do. I have a sense and a feeling and or an auditory voice in my own head that's not my own that allows me to know certain things. Do I know it all the time? I don't. I turned it off. I don't do that. But when I'm in medicine space with people, I do. I have that happen, and I had that happen when I did ayahuasca. So what happens is that we look for those missing pieces. You don't have to tell me what that missing piece is. You don't have to tell me about your trauma. Literally, it is somewhat like a guided meditation where we take you into lower world, where you can meet whoever your guide or your totem animal is, and we, as a team, call back your missing soul piece to you. Again, I don't have to know what happened. I don't have to know when it happened or any of that. Sometimes it's this life. Sometimes it's a previous life. And people say, well, how do you know that there is such thing as a previous life? And I tell people because I believe in, again, what Einstein talked about in regards to relativity. Again, time is not linear. The present, the future, and again, the past are all one. And again, all shamans believe that. So again, the timeline for us is extraordinarily flexible. So what happens when you come down into lower world, which is not hell, by the way? Lower world is a map. The best way to explain it is that it's a map with different components. Psychologically, you would say it is the subconscious part of your mind. I was trained as a clinical hypnotherapist, and I can tell you that the subconscious is incredibly powerful. What happens is when you drop down into theta brainwave is that you're able to access that subconscious part of your brain. When you access that subconscious part of your brain and you're no longer thinking consciously in your prefrontal cortex, what happens is you're able to make lots of times remarkable change in your life. The interesting thing for me is that I, as a clinical hypnotherapist, didn't just talk people down. What I did is I had them go to a very large tree of their imagination, and they would get into their very own personal tree. They would drop down beneath the earth, and that's where, again, they would miraculously begin meeting people and or animals. I then, after doing ayahuasca, I was talking to a native woman about what I did in regards to helping people in my program for 10 years. And she goes, well, that's just not clinical hypnotherapy, that's journeying. And I said, well, what's the difference? She goes, journeying is an actual place. Then I had to rethink that thing that I had been taught about rational versus non-rational, and again, the theory of relativity and time and space and multiple dimensions. So what happens is that when you enter the cave of the deep self, my personal opinion is that it is, in fact, your subconscious mind. There's no doubt. And in that cave of deep self is where we connect to, again, the universal consciousness. And many, many things are presented to us there that we don't have the information for until we get there. Within that map of your subconscious, within lower world, there is a cave of wounds where your first primary wound happened. It can happen in utero. It can happen when you're 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. But there is something that has happened usually before the age of 8 within the cave of wounds. Believe it or not, I never have to take anybody to the cave of wounds during entheogen work. It's never ever had to happen. The interesting thing is that a piece of that, though, will usually appear for people that want to be able to find, again, if there was something about their childhood or something about that had happened along the way that they didn't understand, that cave of wounds will actually come to them automatically. And it's always, at least in my understanding so far, it has never been traumatic for anyone, ever. It is gentle, it is loving, and it is kind every single time. And it doesn't matter how horrific the abuse was, which is a really miraculous thing for me. So nobody has to be re-traumatized again about how bad it was. I treat, again, a lot of women with a lot of sexual issues that have been molested or raped or brutalized in some way. Never once has it ever come to them that, again, it wasn't gentle. Whatever they needed to see or witness, and the same thing with men that have gone to war that have horrible PTSD. Never comes to them in a horrific manner. There is a cave of contracts. And again, as shamans, we look at it like a map. So that cave of contracts, we then understand because we're able to ask questions. When you do psychedelic work, as long as it's not a huge heroic dose, most of the time you're able to ask questions as things present themselves. So it's like the interview that we just had where Hannah said, then I'm able to ask questions. I'm able to be curious for whatever scary pops up. It's the same with contracts. So why did this happen to me? Fill in the blank, XYZ. Why did I have to experience that? Why don't I ever find the right love? Why don't I ever, whatever that blank is, you fill in that blank. And again, you get to go to the cave of contracts. The cave of contracts, again, allows you to not necessarily see the written contract, but it allows you to have an understanding about why you've had to experience or be in the place that you're at currently. Because most of the time, our prefrontal cortex is executive thinking, and we're going to give everything meaning. So if I say the word to you, snurfanurphagus, your brain is going to try to open a file and figure out what snurfanurphagus means. The other thing is that what happens is that I can always tell people that have gone through a lot of therapy, because what they say to me is, I think I'm going to need to process that. And I think to myself, okay, how many, and how long have you been processing it? Oh, 10, 15 years now, okay. How many therapists have you been to? Oh, I don't know, 5, 6, 7. So what happens then is that we have a drip, 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 drip of constant information that comes to us. What happens when you, again, bypass that into the subconscious and actually do this work, the entheogen helps you do that. So you're no longer conditioned by what people have told you is what the problem was. And it's not that it's bad. I absolutely believe everybody needs to do therapy. Everybody. We all need to have life skills that we don't have anymore for a variety of reasons. But the thing of it is that once you've been to a half a dozen therapists and you've told your story a half a dozen times and you've re-traumatized your brain every time you had to tell the therapist about what happened, we have to figure out a better way to do it. That's the thing. We have to figure out a better way to do it. And I'm offering you the opportunity to be curious about what other ways that there is. Because like I said, I absolutely believe in therapy, but when do you graduate? When do you graduate? I actually had a woman come to my program she was like 35 years old. She'd been in therapy since she'd been 15. And she'd seen some really good therapists. And I said, okay, when do you get to graduate therapy? And she goes, well, I never thought about it. Never thought about graduating therapy. Okay, when do you get on with the rest of whatever it is are they your friend? We can get you friends. And she said, well, I had never thought that I could ever get away from therapy. Okay. And I said, and you can continue to do that if that feels good to you. I don't have a dog in the race about that. So what I'm going to use some different terminology. I'm going to call it ego. And I want you to pretend that your ego is like a stool, and it's got 3 legs: power and control, security and survival, and esteem and affirmation. And anytime I'm triggered by anything, by somebody saying, well, do you like that? Or I don't like your haircut, or you don't have the right shirt on, and I love this one, you don't look like a shaman. It's one of my personal favorites. And I got to do a lot of work about that. Yeah. Yeah. So it's very interesting. So what happens when I tell people is that your ego is really, really important for you. And we need to embrace our ego. But when it harms you, it's no longer your friend if it's controlling you. For men, lots of times it is about power and control. Sometimes women too, but women really need security and survival. We have a cave, we're going to cook food in the cave, you guys are going to go out and hunt, you're going to pound your chest and do whatever, bring the food back. We're security and survival, we need that. And then esteem and affirmation is about, I need to feel good about cooking the food in the cave kind of thing, and I'm going to need you to tell me that I'm doing a good job cooking the food in the cave kind of thing. I'm going to need to know I have some value. So what happens then is that when you do an entheogen, and one of the things that I said earlier is that you have the ability to turn the page. Unless you're doing extraordinarily high doses where you are asking for an ego death, which I believe can be valuable for certain people. There's lots of ego death experiences on YouTube, and you can look at some of those. They can be extraordinarily valuable in regards to developing compassion and understanding for the rest of humanity if you don't have any compassion and understanding. But what you have the ability on somewhere between 2 grams and 3 grams of psilocybin is to control, again, your experience enough, and you can tell your ego to go sit down in the corner and be quiet. That would also be called inner child work. So there's many times where I've been able to tell my inner child, I'm an adult now, I got this. I need you to sit in the corner and behave yourself. And I, the adult, am going to work through what I need to do to be able to get to the next wherever I need to be in my life. You have to make a decision that the unknown isn't as scary as what your ego wants you to think it is. The other thing is you also have to be able to let go of enough control. And this is the way I explain it. It's kind of like an orgasm. You got to let a little bit, you got to let control, let go of control to be able to get to that point. You are not in control if you can't choose to lose control. And that's the part I had to learn. And your ego is so good at it that rarely we can see it really in the process of having something happen with our family or work or whatever the case may be. Rarely are we observant enough to say, oh, this is where that's running down the road. Now, eventually, yeah, like I said, you don't look like a shaman. I would breathe in and breathe out. And I would think to myself, okay, how would I like to handle that? And sometimes I say nothing. And I just go, I don't have to respond. Pressing my lips together is, in fact, a response. So it just depends. But again, I get to make that choice. And that's where it all comes down to, is being able to make that choice. As you move into, a flow of love and a flow of connectedness, you need less and less protection from your ego, I'll just tell you. Less and less. For a long time, as I was making huge leaps and bounds in my own transmutation, I'm going to call it, this was my mantra in my head that I repeated again, probably 100 times a day. God is my source and my supply. There's not a person, place, or thing that can be the source of my supply. The divine, the creator, whatever words you want to use, I don't care. Call it a doorknob. It doesn't matter to me. Okay? It's the source of my supply, because if I rely on other human beings to love me enough, I'm going to be sorely disappointed. But that's a contract that I came here to learn about, without a doubt. It's a contract, and I said, oh, hey, I'd like to rewrite that because I'm done with it. I don't want to do any more of that over there that causes lots more pain. I'm going to write a new contract. And how am I going to start doing that? I'm going to do it by being mindful and observant and mantras and all kinds of things. And then I was introduced to ayahuasca. I believe that there is a set of dialectical behavioral skills in regards to emotional regulation and distress tolerance that if we, and you can look those up, that are extraordinarily tribal. They're also very Zen-like. Dialectical behavioral therapy comes from Zen principles. And you learn about radical acceptance. You learn what mindfulness actually is and how to practice it in a step-by-step format. So you learn to become more observant of your own thinking. You're thinking when you're driving, you're thinking when you're washing dishes, what am I thinking about? How is this helpful or not helpful, et cetera, et cetera. And then again, releasing everything else, releasing what people's expectations are and how you actually do that. Again, there's a lot. You don't have to be a dialectical behavioral therapist to teach that. Any therapist, quite frankly, that has any kind of again, cognitive, that does CBT therapy can help you with that. You can certainly look it up on the internet. You can do a combination of both. You can do this and then go, oh my goodness, I have to have life skills because my children drive me crazy. How do I do that? What do those skills look like? If I had been in a different community, a different family, a different tribe, would I need to yell and scream at my kids, for example, and beat them about the head and shoulders, or would I learn a new skill set? A therapist and or someone can actually teach you a skill set, again, to be able to change that and make that different. Within that map of lower world, I'm going to tell you, within your mind, there is a cave of grace. There is a cave of treasures. Okay? There is a cave of your ancestors. And it's very interesting to me because Americans that have sat with me, that have had family that were traumatized, again, were able to, again, talk to their ancestors. I had a woman that came to me that was actually Asian, and she said, all the women in my family have been brutalized for 100 years. I mean, she was just really direct. And I said, okay, well, let's see if we can go in and do some work with that. And we did. Because she said, again, that brutality and what happens to women now in my family stops with my generation. No more. And so there are ways to, again, contractually not carry things down the line. For me personally, it had a lot to do with poverty. Again, I had a lot of family members that, outside family members that did really, really well. But I had a grandmother that was absolutely steeped in poverty. And so for me, it was breaking those agreements that had been passed down in regards to poverty and what that meant if you had money. So it is a imperative thing that if you are going to step into your full potential and you want to not just help yourself, but help your family, help your community, and again, be able to extend out. We're not just talking about being able to buy a boat or a motorcycle. We're talking about being able to extend out to the community. That's the type of work that needs to be done for that. There's also a cave of lost children. For example, again, the Trail of Tears that was Native American. Lots of family members were affected by that. Jewish families in the Holocaust, lots of families that were affected by that. Again, if you're a woman, a child that you have lost, either through abortion or miscarriage, lots of trauma in regards to that, and what and how we're going to fix that and move through that. And then your own inner child. I was able to meet my own inner child in the cave of lost children, and I had done a lot of inner child work, lots. But until I got to meet her and what she needed and to be able to ask her, that was the key in turning that around for me. So the thing that also makes this much, much different is that we look at the elements differently. The wind, the air is located in the east for us, and it's no longer an it. Just like plants are not an it for me, plants are a who, okay? So you change your relationship to the world around you. So air, for me, there is a spirit of air, and I recognize that spirit of air, and I have a relationship with that spirit of air. And air isn't an it, air is an actual who. Fire is located in the south. I also have a totem animal in the south. Again, in regards to transformation and transmutation, it is a yellow boa that sits in the south for me. And again, when we give things up to fire, when we write out a letter and we burn it, or we offer something into the fire to, again, be pleasing to the gods of our understanding, we build a relationship with that particular element. So when I sit in ceremony, I call on those elements because those elements are personal to me, and they add their energy and their frequency, okay, to what it is that I'm doing within a ceremonial space in regards to holding a space. Water is located in the west, and again, it is the first element that we're introduced to inside of our mother's wombs, okay? That water is always cleansing. That water is always there to remove things. Again, a lot of us find great comfort in a bathtub, right? The frequency of that, we float in that, we're baptized in it. Again, we do a lot of our shadow work within that. There's a lot of water in our own body. I actually ask that water that's in my body to actually unite with the water that is on this planet. I'm in ceremony. The earth is located in the north. For me, it is the buffalo that is associated with that. And again, buffalo is all about plowing, again, a road ahead. It's opening the road. It is a road opener that allows new things to come to me. It allows new things to come to, again, the clients that come to me. And again, plant people, it's because we really do think of them as people, okay? So people ask me all the time, are you vegetarian? No, I eat like my ancestors, minus the bugs. I don't like bugs. They ate a lot of bugs. I don't want bugs. But I do eat meat. Animals have a consciousness. They do. Plants have a consciousness also. So again, once you have that, then you begin realizing how important this planet is and the way the planet gives to you and how grateful that you are for all of the life that's here. I have people ask me all the time, what's the difference between doing sacred ceremony and just doing psilocybin in an office with a mask and an earphone? What I tell people is that the shaman holds the magnetic field of the toroidal field of their space plus the space of the planet. We ground ourselves into that toroidal field so that we become one with that particular field. I actually hold the space for people that come to me. I hold the light in, and I hold what you would consider to be the darkness out. And that toroidal field allows people to purge what no longer serves them into the ether or into the ground as I'm holding divine sacred space for their healing to be manifested by the creator of their understanding. And that's what it looks like. And that's the field that most shamans are able to see and perceive, not to mention that we see it every day. And we just don't understand what we're looking at until it's pointed out to us that it's all the same. There's nothing new under the sun. So that toroidal field is why it's important when people come together in a sacred ceremonial space. If you've ever been in a situation where somebody bumped up against you and you felt uncomfortable, or you felt instantly connected, it's because your vibrations matched, or it's because they don't match at all. So bumping up against someone whose vibration doesn't match yours can make you feel kind of weird, or make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, or make your stomach kind of hurt, and you don't know exactly why. That's why. Because of that toroidal field that everybody has. So when we create sacred space, we are creating a safe zone around your experience. I hold that space. Michael holds that space. All of the people that I work with hold that space for you to be able to, again, align with what you need to align with to receive the healing that you need to receive. And that's the perfect example of why when I go out in public, I shield up. It's so that I don't have to. That's my bubble. That's my bubble naturally. And again, if I'm in a particular place that I feel that, again, I shield up before I go to the supermarket. That's how I do a lot of things, actually. Just depends, This, believe it or not, didn't make me do that. I want you to know I stepped outside earlier, though, and I called all the directions before this. But I didn't really have to do this. I didn't feel like I needed to do it. But yeah, I call all the directions as below, as above, so below. I just tell people, if you want to step into the freedom of what that feels like, again, there is a way to make that happen. Thank you all so very much.
Can you give some examples of what a ceremony is like when you're conducting one of these journeys, or some examples of what you would consider a ceremony?
So I guess what I can do is I can just kind of tell you what we do on a weekend when people come to us. We do a cacao ceremony on Friday night. I always call in the directions, and I call your ancestors as well as my ancestors to be present. I think that is extraordinarily important. Again, there's a lot of ways, and I've talked to some therapists that actually do amazing work with entheogens who have a deep understanding of what I'm going to say, frequencies that are elevated and of light, and frequencies that are not of the light. And I believe that there is both. I know that there's some people out there that don't believe in any kind of duality. You just have to see something that is of low vibration one time in your life to understand that there is darkness in the world, in this world of reality. And so part of what that ceremony is us calling in the angels, the spirits of the land, the four directions, the earth itself, the creator, one name, no name, 1,000 names, whatever that looks like within that ceremonial space, and then giving people a chance to put their intentions into that space. So there are multiple scriptures that say, wherever two or more are gathered and speak it, it shall be done. You have to have a belief system of that. But for the most part, if you have a frequency and a vibration that matches with that, that will happen. So one of the things that I talk to people about when they go into ceremony is that everything that happens, I start talking to people, it's gentle, it's easy, and it's loving. That's the container that I hold always, 100% of the time. It's gentle, it's easy, and it's loving, because that is where people receive the biggest amount of healing. If you re-traumatize the brain, if you re-traumatize people again and again, it serves no purpose. I then hold that space for that. So that cacao ceremony on Friday night gets people, cacao is just a little chocolate drink. It's wonderful, but it has a lot of oxytocin in it. So it's a heart opener. Gives you that warm, snuggly, cuddly feeling kind of thing. Helps people share, helps people loosen up a little bit. I serve Cambo if Cambo calls to people, because I believe that not everybody needs to Cambo. And then we spend the afternoon, believe it or not, talking about what you just saw at nauseum, along with whatever you can experience. I tell people that mushrooms grow in decomposition, and that, again, there is a spirit of death, and you might see your friend next to you skeletonized, and what does that mean? Doesn't mean that they're going to die tomorrow. Does not. You may see them shapeshift into an animal. What does that mean? You may see them shapeshift into a variety of things. You may see an alien sitting next to you. What does that mean? So we talk about all of that stuff that happens, and anything that's possible, again, that can happen on an entheogen. And then again, we talk about holding space, what I do to hold space. The song and the playlist that I have is unusual. There's a lot of, I'm going to say, folksy Appalachian kind of music in it, but it takes you through all of the emotions. I've had people sit on a mat and cry for 4 or 5 hours. Just cry, nothing else. I've had people sit on a mat and laugh for 5 hours. Wherever the medicine takes you, wherever the sacrament takes you, is where you are personally supposed to be. You have to have a level of trust within the entheogen that you do. So I spend a lot of time talking about that to provide you a framework of what it would have been like 1,000 years ago to sit with a tribe that wanted your healing as much as you want it.
On average, do people need 1, 2, or 3 sessions? And then do you sort of need like a maintenance program once a year? Or
not usually. I tell people, I think the average person probably needs 1 or 2. There are a few of us that needed lots more. When I tell you that I was in Costa Rica for 14 days, and I probably drank ayahuasca 11 of those days. Yeah, I needed all 11 days. So it just depends on where you came from and how much control that you need to release and let go of, and how much the medicine needs to be tweaked for you to be able to make that happen. Rarely I have one gal that, I have a couple, people stay in contact with me afterwards, but I've only had a couple of people that said, no, I want to come back in a month. One was the man that was the Russian guy. He needed to come back a second time. He said, oh no, I'm all in. So, and I got that. I mean, I understood where he was at in his process. I tell people, I really recommend people to wait 6-8 months, and then we'll talk. And then I'll say, well, either, because I'm one of those people, I don't believe that mushrooms are right necessarily for everyone. Some people need more. If you're a heroin user, quite frankly, and I've had people call me and say, no, I want to do mushrooms first. I tell people, do iboga. If you are addicted to an opioid, you need to do iboga. And followed up possibly with some bufo. And it's not that I think it won't work. I just think you're going to have to do a whole bunch, and there's no need to do that. If you can be one and done, then let's try that first. So everybody's different. Everybody's different.
I have a question about that. Just for people who don't know, what are the energetic qualities or the impact of iboga or bufo, and why would, with your understanding of that, why would you recommend that for someone in that position?
I think the research is, so far, the research that has been done for people, and of course there's a lot of secondhand information. So somebody was stuck doing heroin, couldn't get off, gone through in and out of treatment, finally got up on the internet and said, I did iboga one time and I haven't touched heroin in the last 5 years. Those are the type of anecdotal information that has not been gathered enough by a lot of research. We don't have a real clear understanding or mechanism about why iboga works so well, but it really does. There's been enough research, and there's quite frankly just been enough anecdotal and information that it's pretty profound, and it's usually a one and done for people that have struggled most of their life, which I think is profound. The interesting thing about bufo, that comes from the Amazonian toad. So I'll tell people now, there's a thing about, well, it's DMT. It is DMT, but it comes off of the Amazonian toad. It's not the stuff that's synthesized. So there's some difference between the two of those. Bufo, and I have not done this personally myself, but bufo launches you into upper world. And again, it can be a profound experience of one and done with whatever your trauma is. Does it work for heroin? It has, but it's really good for people that have experienced what I'm going to call, just unspeakable trauma. Again, being able to talk to the angels of your understanding, your ancestors, from 1,000 years ago, that's lots of times what happens on bufo, and people are transformed by that, without a doubt.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I received just from that iboga and bufo can have like a firmness in the contrast that they show, whereas the psilocybin that you hold in ceremony holds that gentle and kind and one who is exploring the self-responsibility of choice. And whereas that may not be available in the same way with those other medicine frequencies.
I think that that's possible too. And I'm always cautious of iboga. My understanding, again, doesn't re-traumatize you from your poor choices. It's not what I would call, in my understanding, loving, but it doesn't re-traumatize you. And a lot of what iboga shows you, again, is a different path than what you're on, and it allows you to then make a new choice along with, quite frankly, cutting your cravings. You're no longer craving it. Now, I will say this about psilocybin. So Michael and I did a psilocybin retreat for a private ceremony for a gentleman that had some issues with alcohol. He did not call us for those issues. He called us because of his relationship with the God of his understanding and being traumatized in the church that he grew up in. Horrible trauma in the church that he grew up in. And he said, but I don't need to stop drinking. Nobody's asked me to stop drinking. It doesn't seem to interfere with my life. And so I text him 3 days after, a week after his experience, and he goes, I'm unable to drink now. And I kind of chuckled. And I said, really? And he goes, yeah, it tastes bad. It feels bad. There's nothing about it that's right for me now. And I just said, oh, isn't that interesting? And he said to me, why is that? And I said, I want you to think about this on a frequency level. The frequency of psilocybin is different than the frequency of alcohol. And they no longer match. They don't vibe. So it's kind of like that picture that I showed you about, the two people in the toroidal field and then feeling icky when you're around the wrong. Yeah, he said, I don't know if I'm going to ever be able to drink again. And I said, well, I don't know. But you're going to save a bunch of money.
Totally. I'd like to share just a brief personal experience of this with psilocybin and my relationship to coffee. Because I really love coffee and no one's asking me to stop. However, I am a young woman and experience my cyclical being every month. And I find that my relationship to coffee is super emotional. And when I don't have coffee, I am highly impacted and people are aware of the contrast. And it's also a very deep and dear pleasure and ritual of my morning. And I'm very grateful to receive the medicine that the coffee is to me. And in my recent experiences exploring microdosing psilocybin, which is taking a very small dosage in the subperceptual range, I, in my perspective, have been raising my vibration to no longer be resonant with what my old relationship of coffee was. And earlier there was a question about the ego, and my ego is like, yes, this is what I do. I'm Hannah Jo. I wake up in the morning, I make my cup of coffee, and I go to bed at night thinking about, oh, I'm so excited to have my coffee in the morning. And now my ego is going through that process and I drink the coffee and my body is so big and loud in its no.
Wow.
And so, but my ego wants to override that frequently and I'm being shown again and again and creating this relationship to my body wisdom to be more spacious and mindful in my coffee consumption. Again, not with having any symptom or expression suggesting me to stop, but still exploring this new relationship. So I just wanted to share that piece. Thank you for hearing me in that.
I just think that that's such incredible wisdom because I want you to know that I think it's things like coffee. I think it's relationships that psilocybin changes our frequency with. I think it's work. I think it's purpose in life. I think it's food because most people that have an addiction, food was their first addiction. There's a lot to be said about what it takes to, again, raise our frequency and then become mindful of that in a way that we evolve and become, again, retrieving those soul pieces so that we step into the absolute flow of life. And that flow is where we co-create. I had a problem in my youth with the word surrender. Any woman who has been, again, had any kind of trauma in her life, yeah, surrender's not an option. And then somebody explained to me that the Zen concept of surrender isn't rolling over and exposing your belly like a dog, that the Zen concept is co-creation. And I got it. I understood then that I could create with the flow of the universe and whatever you want to call that. I could be in alignment with that. And I can just tell you that psilocybin, along with ayahuasca, has shown me that. I mean, has absolutely shown me that that is possible again and again and again. And I am so deeply grateful.
That's beautiful. I think that's an acknowledgement and a recognition that's available for us all to rise into. Is that ownership as co-creator. It's very powerful. Yeah. I do have a final few questions for you, but want to check back in with the audience if there's any other,
In the introduction, you had mentioned that you began your journey by seeing Michael Beckwith, I believe his name is.
Yeah.
How did you come across him? What brought you to wanting to see him and listen to him speak? There's been lots of, like I said, Eastern modalities that, came through my life. So, at some point I had read all of Deepak Chopra's stuff, all of Wayne Dyer's stuff. I'd read all of Louise Hay's stuff. I'd read all of that, Rumi's stuff. I'd read them all. Michael Beckwith was actually on The Secret. I played that movie every day for like 30 days because I had a girlfriend that did that, and it absolutely changed her life. It just ran in the background, and there was a constant. I tell people the way that you change your thinking about something is that you pretend that your mind is a bucket of dirty water, and then one drop at a time, you put in a drop of clean water, and pretty soon the bucket is. There you go. I love this when a good plan comes together like that. Yeah. That's the key. And so Michael Beckwith was on there, and because he'd written a book on the dark night of the soul, and because he is an absolute proponent of, again, your frequency and about, again, getting your thinking in alignment, I really wanted to see him. And like I said, he happened to be in Costa Rica, and so I had signed up. That was my focus. I was extraordinarily focused on what I thought I was going to do. And then and then the God of my understanding, the goddess of my understanding, had a completely different idea. And we met in the middle at the point that I did ayahuasca. That's where we met. And my experience with that was a little different. It was at a facility that does a large number of people at a time, and I had done multiple days, and I kept hearing people around the pool talk about these awakening experiences. And for me, the first few days just felt like I was drunk and stoned. And I talked to the shaman, and I just said, I don't think the formula's quite right for me. And he said, okay, well, we can fix that. We'll mix it up. The night that I did, and that I had the profound awakening of where I was going to live and what I was going to do and how the rest of my life was going to look, and I was told auditorily what that was going to look like, nobody showed up for ceremony except for me. I was the only one. Took about 45 minutes, and then they brought me more vine, because it's a vine and a bark, and they brought me more vine, and it was like a bulldozer had hit because that's what he had said to me. He goes, I think you're going to need a bulldozer. And I said, you might be right. And he gave me another shot of that, and 45 minutes later, I'm puking in a bucket, and I'm in a parallel universe, in a vortex parallel universe. And multiple things happened over the course of 4 or 5 hours, and that's where I'm here today.
You are so clear. I have truly never heard someone speak so clearly about everything, because I know nothing. So thank you. No, truly, I'm so new to this. So I'm passionate about your passion.
Well, thank you.
But one question I have is, you talked about people that see psychiatrists for 15, 20 years, and they never thought about an exit. Mm-hmm. Everything you've gone through and you're doing with how many years you've been doing that? Several years. Do you have an exit? Do you feel you've had an exit, or do you keep learning every time you? I'm a curious learner. This personality that you see, all the time. There's something new out there. There's a new way to present it. There's a new way to experience it. There's always something new. And I usually, when I read like 4 or 5 books at a time. People said, how do you keep up with that? Oh, I get bored with something or other. I read something or other else. But I leave them all out so that I can pick them up. I think that I did ayahuasca that time. Ayahuasca has not
called back to me yet. I've gotten close a couple of times, it's probably on the horizon. I personally, Bufo is an incredibly intense experience, and unless you are working with somebody that can gently take you to that place, I don't like to be rocketed out of my body. Some people don't care about that. A lot of daredevil type of addiction, personality stuff. Talk to Michael in the back. He'll tell you about being rocketed out of his body. Love that stuff. I'm not one of those. I really like the ground. I like my feet in the dirt. And so I'm not much for that. So I've been reluctant to do Bufo, for example. But, it really does work. So I just think that, again, everything is a new experience. And as long as it's reasonably safe, I think we should give it a whirl. Like I said, I learned a lot in regards to, again, therapy and all that. I think all that prepared me to do what I do today, without a doubt. But all of my trauma prepared me to do what I do today, too. So it's all equal for me. I would not give up a single second of any of my trauma. I wouldn't give up a single second of being impoverished as a child. Not a single second. Because it is and makes me available then to meet somebody else at the place that they're at.
So in other words, it's more not medical, but it's your profession. So you don't need to seek for an absolute understanding and trauma gone forever.
The trauma's not gone. How do I want to say that? It's not gone. It doesn't define me. So unless it is pertinent and I need to speak to somebody about the trauma that I experienced because they need to know the details for a particular reason, I don't recount my trauma because it no longer defines who I am. There is a freedom in that it becomes no longer who you are. It just becomes part of the landscape.
So I have a final few questions for you that are rapid fire style. And the first is there a substance that you're curious about but haven't yet tried? And what is that?
Probably peyote.
And what's your curiosity about peyote?
It's more masculine. And from my understanding, it's grandfather medicine. Kind of like tobacco. You can have a relationship with tobacco without smoking, because I have a relationship with tobacco in regards to ceremony, and I use it to change the frequency of energy. Tobacco is, again, grandfather medicine, so I'm very curious about that.
Yeah. And if you could retreat or sit in sacred space in ceremony with anyone, dead or alive, who would that be?
It would... Ram Dass would be very interesting, along with my mother, who died when I was 2. It was very interesting when I did ayahuasca. She was in a car accident. She was actually pregnant with my sibling, and she lived for 2 weeks. I was shown that event, and I came to a deep understanding about why that happened and why I was then raised by my grandmother. And I am so incredibly grateful for her willingness to transition so that I was able to do some of the work that I'm able to do now.
That's beautiful, yeah. And lastly, I'll ask you to share a bit about your personal perspective or the shamanistic perspective of what is beyond this body when we transition.
Don't ask anything hard. I absolutely love that question, though. Oh, my goodness. You should interview more often.
You can catch me here every week, folks.
That's so good. She is so good. I believe in a lot of what Einstein had to say about the theory of relativity and past present, and future, and that it's not a linear timeline. I believe our consciousness is also energy, and it does not die. I believe that then we are then in a collective, and we can call it consciousness. There are a variety of energy fields that you can call it. But I believe when we transition, that our consciousness goes to that consciousness, and then we get to make new choices. You know, I think it's always about learning, but there's no doubt in my mind that I have a son and a daughter I'm positive I've had a previous life with. I've been shown things from Egypt that I would have absolutely no idea where that came from. So I know, unless I guess screw up and get to be a cockroach in the next life, I'll come back to learn more and to evolve. I think as human beings, I think that's really possible.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing that perspective. And I really appreciated learning from you and just opening into flow state with you tonight. And so thank you, Debra, for joining us at the District House.
Pleasure's mine too. Yeah. Thank you.